Everything you have been told about poverty is wrong. Your experience proves it. You have been told that poverty is about lack of money, lack of opportunity, lack of education. You have been told it is a social problem that requires social solutions. You have been told that poor people just need to work harder, make better choices, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. All of this is not just wrong, it is dangerously wrong, because poverty is not a moral failing or a character defect or even primarily an economic condition. Poverty is brain damage, literal, measurable, documented brain damage that begins in the womb and compounds with every month of financial stress until it fundamentally rewires the biological machinery that makes you human. I am not speaking metaphorically. I am not talking about feelings or mindset or attitude. I am talking about structural changes to your prefrontal cortex, measurable shrinkage in your hippocampus, and chronic elevation of cortisol levels that literally eat away at the neural pathways responsible for executive function, working memory, and emotional regulation. The poor do not make bad decisions because they are morally inferior. They make bad decisions because poverty has damaged the parts of their brain responsible for making good decisions. This is not opinion. This is not political ideology. This is neuroscience. And once you understand what poverty actually does to the human brain, you will never look at inequality the same way again. You will understand why the cycle of poverty is so difficult to break, why willpower is not enough, and why the solutions our society offers are not just ineffective, but cruel. Because we are asking people with damaged brains to fix themselves using the very cognitive functions that poverty has systematically destroyed. Let me take you inside the biological reality of being poor. Because the moment you understand what is happening in your skull, everything changes. Not just how you see poverty, but how you see the entire structure of human society and your place in it. The story begins before you are even born. Your mother is stressed about money. She is worried about rent, about food, about medical bills, about keeping the lights on. This is not occasional worry. This is chronic, unrelenting financial anxiety that floods her bloodstream with cortisol day after day after day. And that cortisol crosses the placental barrier. It reaches your developing brain while you are still in the womb. The stress hormone that is destroying your mother's cognitive function is now programming your neural development before you take your first breath. Research from Columbia University shows that children born to mothers experiencing financial stress have measurably different brain structure by the time they are 6 months old. Dr. Martha Farah's groundbreaking longitudinal studies followed thousands of children from birth through adolescence, documenting how prenatal stress literally sculpts neural architecture. The areas responsible for language development, emotional regulation, and impulse control show slower growth patterns, reduced gray matter density, and altered connectivity between crucial brain regions. Their brains are literally being shaped by poverty before they can speak their first word. But it gets worse. The developing fetal brain is exquisitely sensitive to maternal cortisol levels during specific windows of development. Between weeks 16 and 20 of pregnancy, when the hippocampus is forming, elevated cortisol can reduce the number of neurons that migrate to this critical memory center. Between weeks 24 and 32, when the prefrontal cortex begins its initial development, chronic stress hormones can disrupt the formation of neural networks that will later govern executive function. This is not about genetics. This is about the biological environment created by economic stress. Twin studies confirm this devastating reality. Identical twins separated at birth, where one grows up in poverty and one in middle-class stability, show measurably different brain development by age 7. Same DNA, different stress environment, different brains. The twin raised in poverty shows reduced hippocampal volume, hyperactive amygdala responses, and delayed prefrontal cortex maturation. Their identical genetic code could not protect them from the neurotoxic effects of economic adversity. But this is just the beginning. Once you are born into a low-income household, the assault on your developing brain intensifies. You are exposed to higher levels of environmental toxins because poor people live in areas with more pollution, more lead paint, more industrial waste. You experience more unpredictable schedules because poor parents often work multiple jobs with irregular hours. You witness more conflict because financial stress destroys relationships and mental health. Your nervous system is constantly activated, constantly on high alert, constantly flooded with stress hormones that are supposed to be released only in emergencies. The developing brain is incredibly plastic, incredibly adaptable, but it adapts to the environment it finds itself in. And if that environment is characterized by chaos, unpredictability, and chronic stress, the brain adapts accordingly. It becomes hypervigilant, reactive, focused on immediate survival rather than long-term planning. It develops what researchers call a scarcity mindset, not as a psychological preference, but as a neurological adaptation to an environment where resources are genuinely scarce and threats are genuinely constant. Dr. Robert Sapolsky, one of the world's leading experts on stress physiology, has documented exactly how this process works at the cellular level. When you are poor, your body exists in a state of chronic stress activation that fundamentally rewires your neural circuitry. Your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the biological machinery that governs your stress response, is constantly engaged. This axis was designed by evolution to handle acute threats, predators that might kill you in minutes, but poverty creates chronic threats, rent that might destroy you over months. Cortisol floods your system not for minutes or hours, but for months and years. And cortisol is neurotoxic in ways that most people cannot imagine. It binds to glucocorticoid receptors in your brain and triggers a cascade of cellular destruction. It reduces the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the protein that helps neurons grow and connect. It impairs neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells, particularly in the dentate gyrus of the hippocampus where new memories are formed. It causes dendritic atrophy, the literal shrinking of the tree-like branches that connect neurons to each other, but the damage goes deeper than individual neurons. Chronic cortisol exposure alters gene expression through epigenetic mechanisms, changing how your DNA is read and translated into proteins. It upregulates inflammatory pathways that create a state of chronic neuroinflammation. Your brain exists in a constant state of low-level inflammation, like a wound that never heals, impairing cognitive function and emotional regulation. The hippocampus, your brain's memory center, is particularly vulnerable because it has the highest concentration of cortisol receptors in the entire brain. Chronic stress literally shrinks this structure, measurably reducing its volume and disrupting its ability to form new memories and retrieve old ones. This is why people experiencing chronic poverty often struggle with working memory, the cognitive ability to hold and manipulate information in your mind while completing tasks. But even more devastating is what happens to the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain. This region, responsible for executive function, impulse control, and long-term planning, has a complex relationship with stress hormones. Low levels of cortisol actually enhance prefrontal function, which is why moderate stress can improve performance. But high levels of cortisol, the kind produced by chronic poverty, literally disconnect the prefrontal cortex from other brain regions. Neuroimaging studies show that people experiencing chronic financial stress have reduced connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain. This means that emotional impulses bypass rational analysis, the brake pedal of your brain. Your capacity for impulse control and careful decision-making becomes disconnected from the engine of your emotions and desires. This is why poor children struggle in school, not because they are less intelligent, not because they do not care about education, not because their parents do not value learning. They struggle because the chronic stress of poverty has impaired the very brain structures that make learning possible. Their working memory is compromised. Their ability to focus and pay attention is damaged. Their capacity for abstract thinking and long-term planning is underdeveloped. They are trying to compete academically with a brain that has been systematically undermined by the toxic stress of economic insecurity. The damage compounds over time through what researchers call allostatic load, the cumulative biological burden of chronic stress exposure. Poor children are more likely to experience what researchers call adverse childhood experiences: abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, exposure to violence, parental substance abuse, domestic violence, and family mental illness. Each of these experiences further dysregulates their stress response system, creating what neuroscientists call toxic stress. Dr. Jack Shonkoff's research at Harvard shows that toxic stress literally rewires the developing brain's architecture. The neural pathways that should connect the prefrontal cortex to subcortical regions become pruned and weakened, while the pathways connecting the amygdala to the hypothalamus become strengthened and hyperactive. The brain becomes wired for survival, not for learning. It becomes exquisitely sensitive to threat, hyper-vigilant to danger, but impaired in its ability to focus, plan, and regulate emotions. By the time they reach adolescence, many poor children have brains that show structural and functional differences from their middle-class peers that are visible on brain scans. The anterior cingulate cortex, crucial for attention and conflict monitoring, shows reduced activity. The insula, important for interoceptive awareness and emotional processing, shows altered connectivity. The default mode network, the brain's baseline state during rest, shows patterns associated with depression and anxiety. These are not subtle differences. We are talking about measurable changes in brain volume, cortical thickness, white matter integrity, and functional connectivity. Neuroimaging studies consistently show that children who grow up in poverty have smaller hippocampi, reduced prefrontal cortex volume, and altered patterns of connectivity throughout their neural networks. Their brains look different because they have been shaped by a different environment. And then we wonder why they make poor decisions. We wonder why they struggle with impulse control, why they have difficulty planning for the future, why they seem to prioritize immediate gratification over long-term goals. We interpret these behaviors as moral failings when they are actually neurological adaptations to an environment of scarcity and stress. The brain that has been shaped by poverty is not optimized for success in middle-class environments. It is optimized for survival in high-stress, resource-scarce environments. The prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain, does not fully mature until your mid-20s under the best of circumstances. But poverty delays and impairs this development. The neural pathways responsible for executive function, for weighing consequences, for delaying gratification, simply do not develop properly when the brain is constantly bathed in stress hormones. Poor adolescents literally have less cognitive capacity for the kind of long-term thinking that would help them escape poverty. Their brains have been programmed by their environment to focus on immediate survival, not future planning. This creates what appears to be a moral paradox, but is actually a neurological inevitability. The behaviors that would help someone escape poverty require cognitive functions that poverty itself destroys: self-control, long-term planning, delayed gratification, abstract thinking, working memory, emotional regulation. All of these are executive functions governed by the prefrontal cortex. And all of these are systematically impaired by the chronic stress of being poor. Let me pause here for a second and ask you a question that maybe no one has ever asked you. What is the worst part of living with this internal struggle? Not what you tell people, but the part you carry in silence. I want you to know something. What you are feeling is more common than you imagine. Thousands of people are watching this video right now carrying exactly the same weight. If you have the courage, leave a comment telling me what is the hardest part for you. Your honesty might make someone else feel less alone today. Now let me continue showing you how to break this pattern. The cruelest aspect of poverty-induced brain damage is that it is largely invisible. A person with a damaged prefrontal cortex does not walk with a limp or speak with a stutter. They simply make decisions that seem irrational to people with intact executive function. They choose the immediate reward over the future benefit. They react emotionally instead of thinking strategically. They struggle with organization, planning, and impulse control, and society interprets these symptoms of neurological damage as evidence of moral deficiency. We have created an economic system that damages people's brains and then punishes them for having damaged brains. We stress them into neurological dysfunction and then blame them for being dysfunctional. We impair their cognitive capacity and then demand that they use cognitive capacity to improve their situation. It is like breaking someone's legs and then criticizing them for not being able to run. But the damage is not permanent. This is crucial to understand. The same neuroplasticity that allowed poverty to rewire the brain in maladaptive ways can be harnessed to rewire it in adaptive ways. The brain retains its capacity for change throughout the entire lifespan, a phenomenon neuroscientists call experience-dependent plasticity. But healing requires understanding what you are actually dealing with and implementing interventions that address the neurological reality of poverty, not just the economic reality. The first step is recognizing that many of the behaviors associated with poverty are symptoms of stress-induced brain dysfunction, not character flaws. Impulsivity, short-term thinking, emotional reactivity, difficulty with organization and planning, problems with working memory and attention. These are not moral failings. They are the predictable result of chronic stress exposure during critical periods of brain development. Once you understand this, you can stop blaming yourself and start healing yourself. But healing requires more than understanding. It requires systematic intervention based on the principles of neuroscience. The brain changes through what researchers call enriched environments and cognitive training. An enriched environment provides novel experiences, social interaction, and cognitive challenges that stimulate neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity. Cognitive training involves deliberate practice of specific mental skills that strengthen neural pathways through repetition and progressive challenge. The second step is understanding how stress physiology works at the molecular level and learning to manage your stress response system through what I call vagal tone training. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve, connecting your brain to your heart, lungs, and digestive system. It is the biological pathway through which your mind communicates with your body, and it can be trained just like a muscle. Controlled breathing techniques, particularly those that emphasize long, slow exhalations, directly stimulate the vagus nerve and activate your parasympathetic nervous system. This is not mystical nonsense. This is measurable physiology. When you breathe in a 4-count in and 8-count out pattern, you increase heart rate variability, reduce cortisol production, and shift your autonomic nervous system from a state of chronic activation to a state of restoration and repair. Progressive muscle relaxation works by systematically tensing and releasing different muscle groups throughout your body, which teaches your nervous system to recognize and release chronic tension that has been locked in your tissues for years. Cold exposure therapy, whether through cold showers or ice baths, provides controlled stress that strengthens your stress response system and improves your ability to regulate cortisol production. Meditation and mindfulness practices literally change brain structure through a process called meditation-induced neuroplasticity. Regular meditation increases gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex, strengthens connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, and reduces amygdala reactivity. These are not subtle changes. 8 weeks of consistent meditation practice produces measurable changes in brain structure that can be seen on MRI scans. This means implementing what I call biological hygiene. Just as you brush your teeth to prevent decay, you must actively care for your stress response system to prevent neurological decay. This includes practices like controlled breathing, which directly activates the vagus nerve and signals safety to your nervous system. Progressive muscle relaxation, which teaches your body to release chronic tension. Meditation or mindfulness practices, which strengthen prefrontal cortex function and improve emotional regulation. These are not luxury practices for people with time and money. These are survival practices for people whose brains are under assault. The third step is rebuilding executive function through deliberate practice. Your prefrontal cortex is like a muscle that has been weakened by chronic stress, but muscles can be strengthened through targeted exercise. This means starting with small, manageable challenges that require impulse control, planning, and delayed gratification. It means creating external structure and systems to support your compromised internal regulation. It means being patient with yourself as your brain slowly rebuilds the neural pathways that poverty damaged. One of the most powerful tools for rewiring your brain is what neuroscientists call cognitive reframing. Instead of interpreting your struggles as personal failures, you learn to see them as neurological adaptations that were once survival mechanisms but are now obstacles to thriving. This is not about making excuses. This is about understanding the actual problem so you can implement actual solutions. For example, if you struggle with impulse control around spending, the traditional approach is to blame your lack of willpower and try to white-knuckle your way to better decisions. But if you understand that impulse control is governed by prefrontal cortex function that has been impaired by chronic stress, you can implement neurologically informed interventions. You can reduce decision fatigue by automating financial decisions. You can create environmental barriers that make impulsive spending more difficult. You can use techniques like the 24-hour rule that give your prefrontal cortex time to override your limbic impulses. The key insight here is that willpower is not a character trait. It is a cognitive resource that can be depleted and replenished. People who grew up in poverty have had their willpower resources chronically depleted by stress and unpredictability. But willpower can be restored through targeted interventions that address the underlying neurological dysfunction. Sleep is perhaps the most underestimated tool for cognitive restoration. During deep sleep, your brain literally washes itself with cerebrospinal fluid, clearing away the metabolic waste products that accumulate during wakefulness. This includes the amyloid proteins and inflammatory markers associated with chronic stress. Poor sleep quality, which is epidemic among people experiencing financial stress, impairs this crucial restoration process and perpetuates cognitive dysfunction. Nutrition also plays a critical role in brain function that is often overlooked in discussions of poverty-induced brain damage. The developing brain requires specific nutrients to build healthy neural pathways, and deficiencies in these nutrients can compound the damage caused by chronic stress. Omega-3 fatty acids, particularly DHA, are crucial components of neural membranes and are essential for synaptic plasticity and neurotransmitter function. These essential fats cannot be produced by your body and must be obtained from food sources like fatty fish, walnuts, and flax seeds. B vitamins, especially folate, B6, and B12, are required for neurotransmitter synthesis and DNA methylation processes that regulate gene expression in brain cells. Folate deficiency during critical periods of brain development can lead to neural tube defects and cognitive impairments that persist throughout life. Magnesium is perhaps the most underappreciated nutrient for brain health, required for over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body and playing a crucial role in stress regulation, sleep quality, and neural excitability. Zinc is essential for neurotransmitter function and plays a crucial role in neuroplasticity and learning. Iron deficiency, common in people living in poverty, can impair cognitive development and lead to attention deficits that mimic ADHD. Vitamin D, synthesized in your skin from sunlight exposure, acts more like a hormone than a vitamin and is crucial for brain development, mood regulation, and cognitive function. Poor people often lack access to nutrient-dense foods, which compounds the neurological damage caused by chronic stress. The standard American diet, high in processed foods, refined sugars, and inflammatory oils, actually promotes neuroinflammation and impairs cognitive function. Ultra-processed foods contain additives and preservatives that can cross the blood-brain barrier and disrupt neurotransmitter function. Understanding the science of nutritional psychiatry means recognizing that your brain is literally built from the food you eat. Every neurotransmitter, every neural membrane, every piece of cellular machinery in your brain is constructed from nutrients you consume. When you eat processed foods high in sugar and inflammatory oils, you are literally building a brain that is more susceptible to stress and less capable of optimal function. Physical exercise is perhaps the most powerful intervention for reversing stress-induced brain damage, and the mechanisms are now well understood at the molecular level. Regular aerobic exercise increases production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor by up to 300%, a protein that acts like fertilizer for your brain, promoting the growth of new neurons and strengthening existing neural connections. Exercise also increases production of other crucial growth factors like insulin-like growth factor 1 and vascular endothelial growth factor, which promote the formation of new blood vessels in the brain and improve nutrient delivery to neural tissue. But exercise does far more than just grow new brain cells. It reduces cortisol levels through multiple pathways, improving mood regulation and enhancing executive function. It increases production of endorphins and endocannabinoids, natural chemicals that counteract depression and anxiety. It stimulates the release of norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin, neurotransmitters that are often dysregulated in people who have experienced chronic stress. The research on exercise and neuroplasticity is unequivocal. Physical activity literally grows your brain and reverses many of the neurological effects of chronic stress. Neuroimaging studies show that people who engage in regular aerobic exercise have larger hippocampi, thicker prefrontal cortices, and better white matter integrity throughout their brains. The effects are dose-dependent, meaning more exercise produces greater benefits, but even modest amounts of physical activity can produce measurable improvements in cognitive function. High-intensity interval training appears to be particularly effective for promoting neurogenesis and improving cognitive function. The alternating periods of intense exertion and recovery create a controlled stress response that strengthens the stress response system while promoting the release of growth factors. Resistance training also provides unique benefits, improving executive function and working memory through mechanisms that are still being researched. Sleep is perhaps the most underestimated tool for cognitive restoration, yet it is systematically disrupted by the chronic stress of poverty. During deep sleep, your brain literally washes itself with cerebrospinal fluid, clearing away the metabolic waste products that accumulate during wakefulness. This includes the amyloid proteins and inflammatory markers associated with chronic stress, as well as toxins that can impair cognitive function. The glymphatic system, discovered only in recent years, is your brain's waste removal system that operates primarily during sleep. When you do not get adequate deep sleep, these toxic waste products accumulate in your brain tissue, impairing memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and executive function. Poor sleep quality, which is epidemic among people experiencing financial stress due to noise, overcrowding, and anxiety, impairs this crucial restoration process and perpetuates cognitive dysfunction. Sleep deprivation also disrupts the delicate balance of neurotransmitters and hormones that regulate mood and cognition. Even one night of poor sleep can reduce prefrontal cortex function, impair working memory, and increase emotional reactivity. Chronic sleep deprivation literally shrinks the prefrontal cortex and impairs its connections to other brain regions, creating a vicious cycle where stress disrupts sleep and poor sleep increases stress sensitivity. But here's what the research also shows. These interventions are most effective when they are implemented systematically, not sporadically. Your brain did not become damaged overnight, and it will not heal overnight. Rewiring your neural architecture requires consistent, sustained effort over months and years. It requires treating brain health with the same seriousness that you would treat a physical injury. This brings us to perhaps the most important insight from the neuroscience of poverty. Individual interventions are necessary but not sufficient. As long as we live in a society that systematically exposes people to the kind of chronic stress that damages brains, we will continue to see the behavioral and social problems that we associate with poverty. The ultimate solution is not just personal healing, but structural change that addresses the root causes of poverty-induced brain damage. This does not mean waiting for society to change before you begin your own healing. It means understanding that your struggle is not just personal, but political, not just individual, but systemic. The same forces that damaged your brain are damaging millions of other brains. Your healing is both a personal victory and a political act of resistance against a system that profits from keeping people neurologically impaired. The Stoic philosophers understood something profound about the relationship between external circumstances and internal freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But they lived in a time before we understood the neuroscience of stress and the biological reality of how external events literally shape the mind. Today, we know that you do have power over your mind, but only after you understand how your mind has been shaped by forces beyond your control. Seneca wrote about the importance of voluntary discomfort, of deliberately exposing yourself to mild stress in order to build resilience against major stress. Modern neuroscience validates this ancient wisdom. Controlled exposure to manageable stress strengthens the prefrontal cortex and improves stress tolerance. But this only works if your stress response system is not already overwhelmed by chronic activation. For people whose brains have been damaged by poverty, the first step is not adding more stress, but learning to regulate the stress that already exists. The most revolutionary insight from the neuroscience of poverty is that human behavior is not primarily driven by moral character, but by neurological architecture. The brain you have right now is not the brain you were born with. It is the brain that your environment created. And because your brain is plastic, because it can change throughout your entire life, you have the power to reshape it. Not through willpower alone, but through systematic interventions that address the biological reality of how poverty damages and how healing works. This understanding changes everything. It changes how you see yourself, how you see other people struggling with and similar challenges, and how you see the possibility for transformation. You are not broken. You are not defective. You are not morally inferior. You are a human being whose brain has been systematically damaged by an environment of chronic stress and scarcity, and who now has the knowledge and tools to begin the process of healing. The cycle of poverty persists not because poor people lack motivation or character, but because poverty itself impairs the cognitive functions necessary to escape poverty. Breaking this cycle requires more than economic intervention. It requires neurological intervention. It requires understanding that many social problems are actually neurological problems, and that many psychological problems are actually biological problems. This is not about blame or excuse-making. This is about accuracy. This is about understanding the actual mechanisms that drive human behavior so that we can implement interventions that actually work. When we understand that poverty is brain damage, we can begin to develop solutions that heal brains rather than simply blame minds. Your brain is not your destiny, but it is your starting point. Understanding how poverty has shaped your neurological architecture is the first step toward reshaping it. The damage is real, but so is the possibility for healing. The same biological principles that allowed your environment to rewire your brain in maladaptive ways can be harnessed to rewire it in adaptive ways. The question is not whether change is possible. The question is whether you are willing to commit to the systematic, sustained effort required to rebuild your brain from the ground up. This is not about positive thinking or motivational mantras. This is about biological engineering. This is about taking control of your neurological destiny and refusing to accept the brain that poverty gave you as the brain you have to keep. You are not the victim of your circumstances. You are not the prisoner of your past. You are the architect of your neural future, but only if you understand what you are actually building, and only if you are willing to use the tools that science has given you to build it. If you made it this far, I already know something important about you. You do not just want to survive your own mind, you want to master it. This channel is not about magic promises. It is about real people sharing real tools that work in the real world. If this makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel, not because I am asking, but because you deserve a place where you can learn to build the version of yourself you always knew was in there. Biology is destiny until you hack it.